Without further ado, can we ask the panelists to come up? I think you all know who you are, but just in case, to let everybody else know, I'll be reading out their names. For the country delegates, we've had a replacement. His Excellency Sultan Rahim Zoda, the first Deputy Minister for the Republic of Tajikistan, Ministry of Energy and Water Resources will join us. The other panelists include Kaizarul bin Abdullah, Chairperson of the Network of Asian River Basin Organizations, Dr. Ushi Id, the Chair of United Nations Secretary General's Advisory Board on Water and Sanitation, Mr. Gil Hong Kim, Chief Director, Sector Advisory Service Division, ADB, who we met earlier, Mr. Shijio Mizutani, the President and Representative of Director for Swing Corporation, a large private sector Japanese water company, Mr. Mark Pasco, Chief Executive Officer of the International Water Center, Mr. Ponce Ernest Samanjo, the ADB Youth Coordinator, and last but not least, Ms. Jaimala Subramaniam, Chief Executive Officer of Argram Foundation. Welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Chanwa and I will try to best to not just moderate perhaps, but also to provoke some discussion after the series of presentations earlier. This means, I'm afraid, panelists and also Your Excellency, that we would appreciate very much if the first statements you make will be kept quite brief. Let's begin with His Excellency Sultan Rahim Zoda, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to share very briefly about the water security issues in Central Asia region. May I kindly upload my presentation, please? Many of you know basically about Central Asia region. I don't like to say something more about Central Asia region, but I would like to say about the water issues in Central Asia. What is the water issues for Central Asia region? Of course, it's a major link of national and regional security, first of all. It's a key factor of socio-economic development, and because it gives 30% of the regional GDP only at the expense of irrigation, and about 30% of electricity consuming by the region at the expense of hydropower plants. And of course, it's very important for maintenance of ecosystem. And for Central Asia region, there are 5 main aspects closely connected with water security in mid-term and long-term duration. First of all, it's an even location or distribution of water resources over the territory of Central Asia countries. The second is reduction of water resources in mid and long-term perspective due to impact of climate change. The third is increasing of demand for water because of rapid population growth and economic development, and continuation of the degradation of the RLC. You know also about this crisis in Central Asia. And the most important, I think, it's insufficient regional cooperation between Central Asia countries in solution of water, energy, or on addressing the water and energy problems. Next slide, please. What was the first issue? It's an uneven location or distribution of water resources. Through this diagram, you will see that the water resources of Central Asia countries, about 80% is being formed in territory of 2 upstream countries, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. For example, Tajikistan gives about 60% of water resources of the Aral Basin, while the lion's share of water resources is being used by the downstream countries, mostly for irrigation by Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan. So, and the competition between the 2 sectors, between the irrigation and hydropower, make the situation a little bit difficult, because the upstream countries do not have enough resources or sufficient resources of oil and gas, and they use only water for producing electricity. For example, Tajikistan produces electricity, or the share of hydropower in the generation electricity in Tajikistan makes more than 99%, and the same in Kyrgyzstan. And we have no any choices to produce electricity or to use any other resources. That's why, but at the same time, the downstream country, they need for much water resources during the summertime for their irrigation system. It makes a little bit difficult the interrelation between the countries as regard of using or of water resources. Second slide, please. Next slide, please. It's about it's about interstate water sharing in the RLC basin. While the upstream countries provided more than 80% of water resources, as I said, the lion's share of water resources is being used by downstream countries. It's shown in these slides. And on the next slide, you can see, that between the countries Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, the blue one is the share of countries for water resources, and the green one is the water resources is being used by the countries. And you see the differences between the blue and the green, for example, for Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, how much we are providing of water resources and how much we are using. So the second issue as regard of water security in the future in Central Asia region is climate change impact on glaciers. And in period from 1950s until 1990s, it was assessed that glacial resources of Central Asia reduced more than 3 times and continue reducing with average intensity about 0.6, 0.8% a year on glaciation area and about 0.1% on the ice volume. And you can see in comparison with other glaciers in other regions on the above pictures. In this slide, you will see the impact of glacier, impact of climate change to one of the biggest continental glaciers in the world, basically. It's a Fetchenko Glacier in territory of Tajikistan, and you will see how it is retreated in the upper slide. And also the surface of this glacier subsidized since 1986 until 2006 by 50 meters. So it's a really big issue that should be addressed. The next slide, and the third one, the third issue related with the water security in Central Asia, as I said, it is increasing demand for water resources because of rapid population growth. And the rate of population growth in Central Asia, it is one of the highest in the world, because annually it makes 2.5%. And in this slide, you will see that, for example, in 1960s, what was the volume of water per capita? It was more than 6 or 8 thousand cubic meter per capita, while we expecting that by 2025, by 2030, this figure will be decreased until the critical situation less than 1.7, which is sufficient, and by 2040 it already will be decreased until the figure about 1,000 cubic meter per capita, which of course make the situation very difficult if this tendency will be continued, of course. So another issue related with water security, as I said, it's a RLC disaster in Central Asia region. Most of you know about this, that the development of irrigated agriculture and water resources in the RLC has resulted in death of RLC, which was basically until 1960s one of the fourth largest lake in the world. And so far, of course, we reduced or we lost the volume of the RLC by 10 times. You see, it was more than 1,000 cubic kilometer in 1960s, and it decreased until 2004. And
Mr. Deputy Minister, I could say, before you came, we actually had a short session already on the RLC. So if you could focus more on what you think your country should do.
Okay, just in the few slides, in the next slides I will show you. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. That is the status of regional cooperation. Even the Central Asia countries cooperate between them as regard of sharing water resources, but still we need to improve the cooperation between us. And there was assessment that due to insufficient or inefficient management of water resources, the losses make about 3.5% of regional GDP, or if we will improve the water cooperation, we will benefit, additional benefit assessed as 5% of regional GDP. And one of the most important issues, next slide please, I showed here in the table hydropower potential of the Central Asia countries, and from Tajikistan point of view, development of a hydropower plant and improvement of cooperation will bring us to the win-win situation when all countries will have benefit from such kind of situation. Next slide please. And for example, hydropower plant will provide us, it is using of renewable source of energy, generation of cheap and environmentally friendly electricity, saving the fuel resources which are using now intensively for power generation, and reducing the carbon emissions. And at the same time, water reservoirs or water storage of the hydropower plant will provide us an opportunity to manage the water resources sustainably, to ensure the water security in the future, and protection from floods and mud flows, and mitigation and droughts. And one more slide, it is what we will have from effective water and energy cooperation in Central Asia. Of course, it's efficient and useful water resources management, and also one of the important issues is adaptation to climate change impact. And all of these issues, all of this benefit, of course, will provide us an opportunity to have water secure Central Asia region in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Minister. Thank you for speeding up your recommendations. And I think like a lot of the sessions, we've noticed strong emphasis on governments. I think that certainly governments must play their role. And it's very heartening to hear that your government is trying to stir improved regional cooperation for the benefit of all. May I pass it over to Changhua now to say some of the other speakers, please.
Okay, thank you, Simon. And according to the planning and for the dialogue session, we're asking each of the panelists actually maybe to first give 1 minute to respond to the few regional themes we just heard before this session. And very importantly, this is more like from my listening, I think what we've achieved so far, and through all the 11 work streams, we identified very well the status, the challenges we're facing today in terms of water security in the Asia-Pacific region. And in many, many ways, actually, all the groups also presented some actions that need to happen. But somehow, because different working groups are sitting from different angle, very important piece of work is missing is the systematic thinking at the Asia-Pacific regional level in terms of addressing water security region. So I'm going to start the dialogue by asking panelists actually to give their perspectives while responding to whatever things you feel very important you want to emphasize or go deeper to whatever you've heard, but very importantly to help me think through the systematic elements of water security issue in Asia-Pacific region. If I may, I want to start with Dr. Kim. Water definitely is a very, very important piece of work for Asia-Pacific region to manage water security. Your presentation said very, very clearly, say, the purpose, actually, objectives, and its potential implications. My question to you would be, do you think the water could play, to a certain extent, this sort of systematic way of supporting nations in our region to think through the water security issues? If not totally, what else would you propose from ADB perspective? Thank you.
Certainly, this water is one of most important resources or factor for sustainable development. Now, in our discussion, we talked not just the development, but more sustainable development. But to make it happen, then water resource management is very critical, because according to our studies, projections, then in particular Asia, there will be about 40% gap between water demand and water availability. Then this will enforce us to have very tough decision on choice. So trade-off we need to look at. Then how best we can manage these water resources to support the five, as I explained, five key dimensions. So water supply or this household demand and economic development and cities and environment, all these things, how we can manage. This is a very challenging task. And in particular, if we look at our very rapid urbanization in Asia, and now in 2050, about more than 70% of people will live in cities in Asia. So we need to accommodate this. Then this city life will require much more waters than now. Then, in addition to this, climate change impact will come. Then it will make worse in terms of water resource management. That's why now Asian countries, we have now we are now facing very challenges. Then, as you ask whether the Asian countries ready to manage this, then I feel it's a very mixed. As you can see in our water security index, most of Asian countries, they are not secured. Only very few countries, they are managing in a more better way, but most countries, they cannot manage this. So now this asks us to have very urgent actions to address these issues. So yes, water governance is very critical to manage these water resources, but also the scale up, the necessary investment in waters, also very critical. So in overall, I can say water is very critical, but Asia is not ready to manage this. So we need to be more serious to address this, and also now this require quite big shift in our mindset and also policies.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? Say, in order to shift, what are the three most important things that you think need to happen in our region in order to make the shift, basically?
I feel water issues need to be shared with non-water decision makers. In particular, the finance and planning ministries, where they allocate resources. So, in a sense, water is a big issue, but when you look at overall national priority process, then what some countries, I can say many countries, they do not put water as a top priority. So, in a sense, yes, water experts, water engineers did a very good job in terms of understanding water issues very long time, but we didn't do very good job to engage this very important policymaker. That we need to do something differently. And another one is now even we will have some resources, financial resources, we have difficulties to prepare good project, economically viable project. So to scale up our investment, now we need to spend upstream project preparation work. So we can fill up the gap between financiers and project developers. So this area actually we need to address. And another one is institutional capacity. We need to scale up our investment. However, in terms of water-related institutions, their absorptive capacity, there are some questions. So we need to also think about how we can enhance capacity of these institutions.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. That's really helpful. If I may, so political priority at the national level, the water security issue needs to be lifted up, that's for sure. Then cross-sector sort of integration with other or leveraging other priority sectors like energy and among others would be very, very important. And third, it is a capacity issue, not only at the institutional level, but also capability to develop investable projects. I think that's sort of reasonable summary, I guess. So thank you for your input. If I may, can I ask Dr. Bin Abdullah, and the Chairperson Network for Asian River Basin Organizations. And IWRM definitely has been recognized as a very important tool, useful tool in many, many ways, and it has done its part. But in the meantime, I think gaps have also been identified in order for this tool to become more impactful or effective to manage the water security issues in our region. Can I ask you, say, what are the 3 areas you think that could be improved short term in order to lift up this tool to become more impactful? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. NARBO is a network of Asian River Basin organizations, and our member organizations are the front runners. They are river basin organizations, and you could say that they are at the lowest level in terms of how we manage water. So while at ministerial national level we make policy decisions, it's our members who have to carry it out. And so in managing river basins, we find that we need to look at certain areas. We need to look at how we need to manage it. We need to look at the governance structure. We need to see whether we have the right institutions, the right legislation in place. We need to also be directly dealing with the stakeholders. For example, in a drought, very often governments would say that we would put the lowest priority on agriculture. And so it becomes a problem when our members go to cut off the supply. And they have to explain to people whose livelihood depends on producing a crop that we are not able to give you the water because it's a situation and you are the lowest priority. And we find that in all of this, they have to be good in dispute resolution. We have to build up the leadership in these organizations. So as we work towards achieving water security, what NARBO is doing is we have developed an indicator looking at this kind of soft measures in the context of IWRM. And you could say that this indicator is a little similar to what we heard at the start of this session, where ADB, through its Asian Development Outlook, has come up with 5 indicators. In our case, we are looking at the areas of governance and where we are in each of these areas. And we are making a commitment at this World Water Forum that we will build up capacity among our members so that they can understand what the indicator is all about, and that they would sign up and commit themselves to improve on the management of the river basins. And we would, at the same time, we have developed a benchmarking program which will help our members so that they can move up on the IWRM indicator. And this would be our commitment coming up from this World Water Forum.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Dr. Kim mentioned actually the capacity or capability to develop good projects that are ready to be invested is a major barrier. As you mentioned, actually, your network basically working at the very bottom, reality.
They are the frontliners.
Yeah. And so the capability of, your group of people at the local level, your capability to develop projects that are investable naturally becomes very key. Can I ask you, so is it the capability to develop good projects, the major barrier, or there are some other barriers you think we need to address as well?
Actually, if you look at water projects, in many cases, we tend to separate the development part from the operation part. And so governments tend to put a lot of emphasis and a lot of funding on the infrastructure part, because that gives them a lot of visibility. And at the end of it, it's handed over to the RBOs, and the RBOs are the ones who have to operate and manage it. So the RBOs, the frontliners, they are not very directly involved in this process of project development.
Okay.
They are more involved in putting it into order and carrying it out. And somehow it's always been seen as a less glamorous role. And this is the backdrop in which our member organizations work.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you very much. May I move to Dr. Urshi Ide or Ed? Sorry. You work on sanitations, and if I may actually ask you to see if you put sanitation in the bigger context of the security issues, because you have linkages with many other aspects there as well. What are the 2 or 3 priority areas that you think, from your sector perspective, that need to be addressed in order to link up better with the whole system, that we will be able to achieve water security in our region? Thank you.
Well, first let me clarify. I'm not working on sanitation. I am the chair of the advisory board on water and sanitation to the Secretary General.
Okay, sorry.
And no, I just want to make clear that I'm not a sanitation person. I'm not even a water expert. I'm a politician who was, when in 10 years ago, our advisory board was set up by the then Secretary General. I was invited to be a member of that advisory board, not because I was a water person, but I was a politician. Dealing with international environmental issues. But, and now I come to your question, we had in our board various working groups, and when we started to work in 2004, I recognized that the least sector that is taken care of is sanitation. You know, our mandate was to push governments who had promised in the MDGs to have the proportion of people who have no access to water and sanitation until 2015. So when we started working, nobody tried to say shit, excrements, fakers, toilets, and whatsoever. So I started to say, okay, a problem that has no name is not a problem. So I will campaign that the problem is be giving a name. So together with our then chair, then the Prince of Orange, today the King of the Netherlands, we decided to take sanitation on board. And what did this mean? We initiated the International Year of Sanitation to break the taboo, because sanitation was not talked about, not even within the UN diplomatic language. Today, even the Secretary General talks about ending open defecation. It was us who, in a resolution in 2010, insisted to include the demand to end open defecation when we decided to have a sanitation drive to 2015. Because in 2008, when we had the International Year of Sanitation, there was a dynamism, and all of a sudden, especially in your region, it was taken on board, and there was a huge leap that sanitation was taken care of, and there was debates and women organization, the youth, and so on. So we thought we have to carry on this dynamism that was created during this year. So in a conference in Tokyo, we decided, and that was not our idea, it was the idea of the participants of that conference to now create the sanitation drive to 2015. And there, again, we emphasized that sanitation must be on the top of the agenda. Coming now to the second part of the sanitation. Within the MDGs, sanitation is only defined as having access to a toilet, to an improved toilet, But in the run of our work, we recognized, well, what do you do with the things that are in a toilet? The UN must take up the question of how to treat, to transport it, to treat it, to make biogas out of it, to reuse the water, to have sewage systems. So that is what we then carried on into the debate for the preparation of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goal. When you look now into the water goal number 6, you will find that it is now broader in scope. Wastewater is included, reuse of water is included, even hygiene is included. So that was a big satisfaction for our work, that along our work we could now see that in the SDGs it is taken over, and the member states of the UN have accepted this. And that I'm very satisfied.
Yes. Thank you very much. Can I just follow up? And I often, work with people in the innovation sector, even in the toilet, that sort of space. There's a lot of innovation happening, and solutions like, for instance, linking up the sink with another tank, using you wash your hands or clothes, whatever, use that water to flush the toilet. So I believe actually technology is not the barrier at all, and. But you managed actually through the UN platform to lift it up to very high level. Can you say 3 or 5 or 10 years we will be able to solve this issue?
Well, it depends on the political will. You see, I have come to learn very deeply that water, and more even sanitation, is a gender issue. Men can just stand behind a tree and pee. A woman cannot do that, And girls coming to menstruation age, 10% of them drop out of school because there are no toilets in school which you can lock, so that girls have a private room. So these were things that are not discussed. So I think if politicians are taking these things up, and maybe more women are not sitting only in the room to listen, but more women are sitting up here as decision makers, maybe then in 10 years we will have a better planet.
Good point, actually. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to move to Mr. Mitutani-san. You are the only one sitting on the stage from private sector.
Yes.
The role of private sector is emphasized again and again throughout today, and I believe throughout the 7th World Water Forum there as well. It will be interesting to see your view of the water security issues actually in our region, particularly the private sector's view of the opportunities actually you see for private sector to play a role. It'll be interesting to see what are 3 priority or opportunities, biggest opportunities you see after listening through all the analysis actually potential out there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for Ms. Wu. At the water security-wise, Japan is blessed with water, and we have plenty of waterfall. Volume of rainfall 2 times the world average. However, Japan is a country vulnerable to the national disaster. In other words, we can say Japan is a country with high disaster rate, such as typhoon, earthquake, torrential rain, and volcano activity and tsunamis. So we have a lot of experience how to protect the disaster prevention and reduction measures. And those experience we should share, adapted in Japan to the Asian countries. For example, last year there was a very heavy rain in Hiroshima areas. That rainfall volume is more than 120 millimeter in 1 hour. Total volume was 286 within 3 hours. More than 100 people died and 4,000 houses were flooded. Through that experience, we established early warning systems by collaboration with Japanese private weather forecast companies. They are the world's largest weather service companies. Of course, Japanese government meteorological agency providing general weather forecast, but private company especially providing early warning informations. That's very useful for protect our water facilities. So I'm sure those experience and information to be shared within the Asian countries.
Thank you. Can I a follow-up question? I think Swing has been, the major player operator of the water treatment facilities in Japan. You also have international operations in different parts of the world, particularly in Asia. Can I ask you, what are the things blocking you to do more? The key barriers that you think that need to be addressed in order for you to scale up quickly the best practice and solutions you were talking about. Thank you.
Yeah. So through other panelists explained, Asian countries coverage for the sanitation less than 50%. Originally Japan, flush toilet rate is more than 90, and sewerage coverage more than 77%. And water supply coverage 97.7%. So those are experience, and also the development water facilities such as sanitations. Japan is in a position, government and the municipality and also the private company jointly contribute development of the facility in Asian countries. That is okay? Takemura-san? Yes. He's from the government.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to move to Mr. Ponce about the youth. I think one of the presentations actually early on talked about the exciting trend that we are getting more younger generation actually engaged in addressing water security issues in the region. And our region happens to be a very young region, even though we have, Japan, China started to going through the aging issues. But overall, this is rather young region. So youth leadership or young generation's engagement, participation becomes very, very key. So it would be interesting to understand and say, what do you see the very critical role for the youth actually to take on in our region and to address water security issues?
Thank you very much, Ms. Changhua. I'd like to take a moment before pointing out the things that needs to be done or what the focus of youth are. Take a moment first to recognize, I think, how far youth have come in terms of participating and contributing to hopefully the work of Asia Pacific Water Forum and the partners here. From a year or two ago when we were, I'm still very nervous, but we're very nervous to approach APWF, and now a young person has been invited to join a high-level panel, so I think it's a credit to how determined and passionate young people are, but also to how open APWF and its members have been, so we're happy to be here in this panel today. I think we also have come far in terms of collaboration for the 7th World Water Forum. In terms of knowledge, we have established the International Youth Steering Committee, which I'm very happy to say has been driven a lot by ADB Youth Initiative as well as Korea Water Forum. So it's been a movement from the Asia Pacific region. It brought together different youth groups from Water Youth Network, World Youth Parliament for Water, and all these youth groups, which in total here we've contributed to about 56 side events and sessions in the whole forum, learning from each other, sharing resources. I'd like to also point out that we've moved forward in terms of engagement, not just on knowledge, but hopefully on projects. And I think it's also been credit to the movement of Asian young water leaders. In the Asian Sanitation Solutions Dialogue session, which we've co-coordinated with Plan International, we've brought together the most innovative youth-led projects in sanitation in the region to showcase what young people are actually doing on the ground. And ADB has agreed to give a small seed fund, including support and and mentorship to these youth groups. We also have some project pilot demonstration activities in the pipeline. It's just been recently signed a pilot on youth river councils that we will be doing in the Philippines, which we hopefully would provide guidelines for that we hope to work with NARBO on how young people can be engaged in IWRM across Asia. I'd also like to point out, as we've done the session coordination for sanitation for this for APWF's regional process, that sanitation is not just a women's issue or a gender issue, it's also very much a youthful issue. 1.8 million children annually die under the age of 5 because of poor sanitation. 90% of those are from water-related diseases, and young people are often seen as vulnerable and victims of sanitation, but at the same time, with, as you point out, being a very youthful region with 60% of the global youth population here in Asia who are energetic, passionate, and really willing to contribute if given the nurturing and space, I think we can turn this a youth issue and make a global youth movement and an Asian youth movement to solve our sanitation crisis.
Sure, just a follow-up, and you mentioned actually in order to do more, to do better, ADB is already very kindly offering some small amount of seed money, whatever, but in order for you to do more, definitely that sort of funding support won't be adequate. What are the other innovative sources are you looking into in order to really bring together enough resources to support you to do more?
I think more than the funding, Ms. Chonghua, it's been partnership that we all have different resources. Most of the Youth for Asia finalists that we showcased didn't have any funding. They just did it without any fund at all, but they've been building toilets, they've been going out to communities, building urinals across India in different states, and it's mostly, I think, working with different partners who have certain things, the time, either the ideas or the innovation to do it. So we'd of course like some funding, but we would like partnership from APWF and the stakeholders here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I also definitely also want to compliment your increasing level of confidence sitting among, the high-level players here as well. I witnessed your growing up in the last couple of days, so congratulating you on that. Now, I'm going to move to Ms. Jayamala in order to not to repeat the mistakes I made just now, and I'll be interested to hear your perspective from your foundation perspective. And you see the priority areas or opportunities that you think you could contribute actually to the improved water security issues in our region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So RGEM is a grant-making foundation. It's an India-funded, India-focused, domestic water and sanitation-focused foundation. Our interest areas are in groundwater, the management of it as a resource, and in sanitation, our focus areas are before and after toilets, so behavior change for construction and usage of toilets, and waste management post-usage of toilets. So RGEM has a work in 3 areas and intersect in 3 areas that were presented through the session today: water and cities, water and green growth, and integrated water resources management. And I would like to echo a lot of the issues and indeed the solutions that were posited by the speakers. However, in solving for these issues, as ARGEM, we have identified 3 challenges which I would like to bring to the table here in the hope that we can trigger conversations around it that could accelerate solutioning for those. The first is we talked about multiple stakeholders for all the solutions that we have for issues under each of these themes. And those are important. So identifying the right kind of stakeholders, we believe, is very, very important. And from our work, we've seen that stakeholders are a dynamic group. For instance, in sanitation and behavior change, we found that bringing in professional communication experts, the kind that have sold ice to the Eskimos, would actually work very well to sell sanitation as a service. And we did that very successfully in our projects. We've put neuroscientists into understanding what is the problem of usage for existing toilets, even where we see that they are desirable and they need to be used, but they are not being used. So multiple stakeholders, we believe, are an open platform, and it's dynamic, and we need to keep our eyes open to understand who can add value to this portfolio of stakeholders. But the important point that we need to understand is how do we create complementarity between these stakeholders. What we found is that the goal of one stakeholder group should not and cannot do value destroying to the goal of another stakeholder group. So how do we get privates, government, and citizens work together? What is that framework of accountability, and how should we imagine the monitoring and evaluation of that is a big challenge. And ARGEM continuously is working on that to establish better and smarter accountability frameworks. Challenge number 2, we all spoke about resource sustenance, and I think that's at the core of all that we do. But I'm sure I've seen it from our work, and I'm sure you will all agree that the moment we step out of this room, what we have as a real enemy to that idea is extreme short-termism. So everybody is very impatient to have a solution today, and that's quite the contrary to the core of resource sustenance and intergenerational sustainability of resources. So what we have to do is understand how to market the idea of resource sustenance, how to reduce the discount that is placed on anything that's future, how to reduce the premium that's placed on anything that's a solution for today. And that's an area of work that ARGEM is continuously working on. The third challenge is we all agree that integrated water resources management, or indeed integrated land and water resources management, as somebody said in the previous session. In fact, they went on to say it should be called integrated ecosystem management. We all agree that that's important. But from ARGEM's work, we've seen that anything integrated works very well at local scales. But the moment we look at replicability, it becomes an issue. So the scalability quotient of integrated solutions are very difficult to establish. So ARGEM's endeavor, and the reason we believe that's happening is because the nature of integrated solutions makes it very complex. And we have to deconstruct and simplify those solutions so that we can increase scalability. So the idea for ARGEM is to look at how do we improve simplification of those solutions? How do we force and rank order the value of different elements of the integratedness? Because sometimes perfection becomes the enemy of good. We cannot go from 0 to 100 on day one. We have to have a scaled methodology to approach that desirable solution. So I think that's the goal that ARGEM is grappling with at this point in time. So our commitment is really to look at how to make our desirable solutions more and more palatable, more and more marketable, so that we can have more and more unconverted people in this room, not literally but figuratively.
Thank you. Can I just follow up a question, the role of social media, particularly when you work at the grassroots, at the local level, more and more so now, you will be able to have more people, public, participate into that process because you have the mobile devices, whatever, or more people having access to that. Have you done anything like that using the sort of mobile devices? Can you give us a case?
Yes. So I think what we are trying to do, so we have the India Water Portal, which is actually completely funded by RGM, and that's really the digital platform through which we want to increase outreach. Currently, it's moving beyond being just a repository, and what we're trying to do is to make it interactive in that we have people participating in both providing data as well as being informed by the data that's already there. So there are some case studies that are building up nicely, but again, the scale is an issue. So we're trying to see how the small case studies can actually have larger outreach, and that's really the process we're working on. But we see that as the future for us.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to just, unless there are some questions in the audience, I will be happy to give a few hands. If you have questions, please raise your hands. If not, I'm going to carry on. Urgent questions? Yes, please, Terry. Yeah.
Yeah, just some quick reactions. I think Dr. Hyde, you convinced me. But also you mentioned something which is very important, which is to give the problem a name. We've been working with hundreds of people on why government irrigation policies are not working, why institutional reform is not working. And so we gave it a name, which is a failure to manage these transitions. Once we agree that this is the problem statement, then we can work on this. So I think this is what we try to do. Ravi asked to look at indicators. So in our white paper, we propose that the farmers' incomes be measured against minimum wage. Because if you just focus on reducing poverty, with the poverty indicator, people will go from $1.3 to $1.6 per day, and so what? We are asked to have smart farmers who respond to markets, who are sustainable, who use all sorts of smart practices, and in practice they earn half of the minimum wage. How can we expect them to do that? So maybe a type of indicator like this. Dr. Kim, you mentioned trade-offs. So I would like to suggest also that trade should be a very important issue, because a key issue for a number of governments is trade-offs between economic water productivity and food security. So the more people think that there are risks associated with trade or imports, the more they feel they have to allocate water resources to their own producing their own food. So in terms of looking at in the future to have a proper trade-offs, probably regional cooperation and trade would be very important. And finally, Ponce, you're very enthusiastic. Unfortunately, we don't find very enthusiastic young farmers or old farmers. And we don't see farmers who are enthusiastic about the future of their children in farming. And it's really a question also for sustainability. You're from India, maybe. You know that in India, farmers are mining groundwater resources deliberately so that they can make enough money so they can buy an education for their children so that they can get out of there. So unless you promise them a kind of a promising future, they will continue to do that. And we go back to issues of what kind of future for our farmers in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kim, anyone, colleagues would like to respond, or no? Or nothing to respond, or anything?
Yes, I'd quite like to respond. I think that, Thierry, that last point you made was one that I thought about when you were presenting earlier. You know, I'm from a country that actually produces excess food, but the challenges we've had in our farming communities in the last 20 years, particularly, is that people are leaving the farms. And I think the challenges of us producing more food and greater agricultural production on our rural communities is something we really do need to be quite careful about. So I'd like to support that. I thought that when you presented earlier.
Yeah, I just recognize, actually, I do not have your name on my list. So, yeah. Now you're the last one on the panel for the first round. Yes, please. Would you like to respond? No, I do not have Mark's name here.
I'm not known
I had
for
the
staying
previous.
quiet.
Sorry. No, my version was the previous one.
Can
you please also respond to your response to
Sure.
The key issues that we discussed already? Thank you.
Sure. Well, one of the things that there's a couple of things that I've thought about during the afternoon, and I'm leading a capacity building organisation currently, and one of the things I think about is what I'm going to try and describe as T-shaped water professionals. So I think of the people in this room and the people that who I think have been, or the institutions who I think have been successful in integrated water resources management, or indeed in addressing complex problems, are those where we have a deep understanding of technical issues, but we also have the ability to think and act and join dots across our sectors. So if I go to Dr. Kim's comments earlier about working with other ministries, I think, for example, to work with other ministries, you have to have another language. You have to put your water language away for a moment and develop another language. So I think one of the things that we need to do in our sector is to have more T-shaped people. That just doesn't mean they've got big heads. I think we've got to be able to operate across disciplines, across sectors, across ministries, and so I think that's fundamentally important for the transition that we're in, because we do need to make step changes. We can't just keep going incrementally. So we've really got to do something quite different. And I suppose if I can add then, I think that we need champions. And Ponce, I talked to Ponce in the back of the room earlier, and he was worried about coming up here, and I said, well, so am I. I'm almost intimidated by some of our youth, and if I think back to when I was that age, I wouldn't have been game, Ponce, to be sitting where you are. So I think we need to foster champions in our sector, and that's champions at all levels. And dare I use the word leadership? Someone did use the word before, but I haven't heard it much this afternoon. I think we really do need to encourage leadership and not be afraid to push forward our young leaders. And before I came here, I was in that other city. This is not an easy event to negotiate, but I was in a session on women in water, and I think that's, Ravi, you talked about embracing in your summary, embracing other groups. You mentioned the youth, and I think the gender issue, or the women in water and the diversity, and the men in water for that matter, but the gender issues in water, I think, need to be addressed, and we need more women leaders.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Yes, please. Yes, please, Dr. Kim.
Let me talk on this water for food. But food security is very critical. And if we look at now Asia's water use, then more or less about 80% of the water is being used for agriculture. So if we want to address this water security, then we need to look at how we can enhance productivity in agriculture or water use in the food production. This is very critical. If you do not handle this, then even the other area, we can improve water efficiency. It's very limited. That's why now we need to think about how we can help these agriculture sectors to improve productivity so that we can have win-win situation. So this is very critical. And in that sense, in ADB, in our now agriculture project or irrigation project, now every project we are addressing productivity enhancement because this should be done. Then another area we need to look at is now food waste. This one we need to address this. Because if you look at the data, some said 30%, some said 40% of these crops or that's wasted. In developing countries, because of many infrastructure issues that connecting to markets or storages or even some skills to have this, after this harvesting, that even simple skills or simple infrastructures, we can address a lot. So it's a very nonsense. Most of the water is being used by agriculture, and then about 40% we are wasted. So it's a very easy way we can address this. So I feel now we need to be serious on how we can help to reduce this food waste, in particular developing countries. Then another one is now wastewater or water reuse for food production. Now we need to talk about this because now even we visit in several water utilities and wastewater treatment facilities. After water treated, wastewater treated, then the water is reasonably clean, but that water is just wasted. That's not connected to other use. For instance, some agricultural production, or even that can be connected to energy. I can give you just one example. Recently, ADB approved private sector project. Private sector, I'm talking, not public. Private sector project for wastewater treatment in China. Then that treated water will be used for cooling water in energy. That's money. That's enough for them to invest wastewater treatment. So I feel now we need to connect different dots in water. Otherwise, everybody feel we need more water and we have problem. So if we can connect, then there are some room for us to improve the efficiency and also remove some unnecessary waste. But this is the area I feel we need to think about.
No, thank you, Dr. Kim. Those are great points to add. I'm going to start a round of priority things recommended by the panelists here for our region to consider in terms of importance. You can rank them. And we all talked about the role of government. And so political will, the government is very, very important in terms of setting the directions, certainty of policies, as well as targets. So I'll be interested to hearing from Mr. Rahim Zoda, and from the government perspective, what do you think? What could happen, actually, in order to make sure water security is lifted high up there at the national government agenda? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Basically, as I said during my presentation, the water in the top of the agenda in Tajikistan in the highest priority. It has been given the highest priority by the government. Why? Because it's a main source of our life in Tajikistan. As I said, more than 99% of electricity comes from water, from hydropower. and our country does not have sufficient resources of gas and oil. That's why, since even gaining the sovereignty in 1991, Tajikistan, the government pays high attention to resolution of water issues. And that's why the government of Tajikistan also has provided a number of water resolutions, initiated a number of water resolutions to the UN, and most of popular of them, it's announcing of 2003 as International Year of Freshwater, and then the period of 2005-15, the International Decade for Action Water for Life, and 2013 as International International Year of Water Cooperation. And the government, what we are doing now, because we're also facing some challenge in water resources management in our country. Even we have plenty of water resources, we face a number of challenges, including the floods, even the droughts in some part of our country. And still having the 99% of electricity coming from water in wintertime, the river flow is reducing. And Tajikistan, since, I don't know, 10, 15 more years, we are facing the shortage of electricity during the winter time. And only in the main cities, the population will receive electricity during winter time. But in the rural areas, in winter time, so far, Tajikistan people will receive only 6 or 8 hours electricity because of lack of storage. To accumulate water resources to produce electricity in winter time. And why we are promoting also water cooperation on the regional and the international level? Because Tajikistan depends also from other countries. Why, for example, we are facing the lack of electricity? Because Tajikistan has been disconnected from Central Asia power grid, and we cannot receive electricity from the third countries. At the same time, in summertime, we have enough water to produce electricity, or generate electricity, but because of lack of market of electricity, we cannot export our electricity to other countries. That is a problem, and I think only cooperation between countries will give us such kind of opportunity to improve all the situation. I mean, to receive electricity in wintertime or to export electricity in summertime. But nevertheless, of course, one of the most priority issue in Tajikistan also drinking water supply. Even we have the plenty of water resources, still only 57% of electricity of our population has an access to safe drinking water. And you know, our president attended the opening ceremony of the Seven World Water Forum, and His Excellency mentioned that the most problem is infrastructure and financing. Infrastructure and financing. We were talking a lot about capacity building, about institutional mechanism, legal basis, data availability, building the trust, transparency, etc., etc., etc. But having all these means of implementation, but do not have infrastructure, you are not able to manage the situation. But for infrastructure, you need financing. That's why financing is also very important. And we are looking that our development partners will work with us in this regard, and this makes our water secure country in the future, I think. And the same, it's not only for Tajikistan, but for all Central Asia regions. Of course, I can talk a lot about the programs, strategies, and one more issue I would like to underline here, it's a reform of water sector in Tajikistan. And we saw that we have many problems, and the government of Tajikistan has decided to reform the water sector. We started this process on November 2013, which means that the first principle was separation of policy and regulation issues from the operational functions. We did it by creating the Ministry of Energy and Water Resources, which is responsible for policy and regulation issues, and some operators, they are working on the technical issues. And the second one is a transition to integrated water resources management, and the first principle in this way is a transition to basin water management. So far we are managing our water resources within the boundaries of administration boundaries, units. And we just before coming to Seven World Water Forum, we submitted the draft strategy reform of water sector to the government of Tajikistan, when we are looking that maybe in the nearest future the government will approve this strategy, and that will play a basic role for our future reform process. But reform itself is a process which takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, financial, technical, etc., etc. And only by support of the government and the development process, we think that we will be able to implement this reform successfully.
Sure.
Thank
Can
you.
I just ask you, how about the pricing of water in your country?
So far, the price of water in Tajikistan very low. Basically, we are talking about the not about the price of water, but price of services. So, price of services of those companies who are providing the water for irrigation systems, or providing water to operate for population for drinking water supply, etc. And I can say that for irrigation, for example, such kind of services per cubic meter of water is very low. It's a 1.5 dirham. It would be less than 1 cent.
But would that be part of your reform, sector reform?
Of course, we are, the tariff regulation, tariff policy is part of this reform.
Okay.
So within the reform, it would be also calculated, and our focus is to achieve in the future the economically sustainable irrigation or water system in Tajikistan.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Eid, and I would like to ask you, the UN process, now we are almost at the very end of the MDGs, so now everyone is looking into SDGs. Do you see the SDG process or targets we set at the very end will become the major driver for countries to work around water security issues, particularly from this region?
Well, at the moment, we have a consensus paper, which was delivered by the Open Working Group, of UN member states. And there are 17 goals. Some people say, well, these are too many, but if you have such an ambitious agenda like sustainable development, then maybe 17 goals are even too little. Yeah, but we have 17 goals, and behind this, each goal is a constituency. Yeah, so these constituencies behind water, behind cities, behind health, I think they are the driving forces that then also what has been decided will be implemented. Of course, we don't know whether they will be decided, but my feeling is that listening, the G77 and other groupings are not interested to reopen the paper. So I am almost confident that the SDGs, as they are in the moment, will be decided. Now, the water SDG, we have one dedicated water goal, number 6. But what is important also to me, and what I have heard here today, the nexus approach is a little bit ingrained. It's not systematically in the SDGs, but you can see, for example, in the SDG cities, there is water and disaster. Yeah. And in other goals, you have interlinkages. And what is then necessary is that the indicators, to measure the progress to reach the targets, are seen as an interdependent linkage. Yeah. So if we take it very serious, I'm quite confident that first they will be decided. But second, if we take it then serious, we have to have good monitoring systems. Yeah, we have to have a platform that is reviewing the process that governments are really doing what they have agreed in New York. That is always a problem. No, it's very easy for the heads of states to be in New York and to sign a paper, but what is happening afterwards? So what is necessary is to link, the international discussions with the regional discussions. And I think your region here is well prepared. When I have listened to what you have decided and discussed today, I'm absolutely impressed, what knowledge, what impetus there is, and what dedication. So I'm quite sure if you take it up here in the region to see to it that your governments are implementing what they have decided, we will come together in 5 years' time, and we hopefully see some progress. If I hear the minister talking about the reforms, this is very encouraging, So linking the national and regional to the international discussion, I think this is where, you have to link this so that it is not, you do something here and what is decided in New York is something else. So I think, but I'm very confident that this is going to happen.
Thank you. Can I just ask you, following up, say, for instance, on climate change issue, we have I'm asking a follow-up question. Say, on climate change issues, we have international process, the COP, convention, whatever. There isn't that sort of a level platform to address the water security issue. So I'm just wondering whether this SDG thing will become the convening power in terms of for regions coming together or international community coming together to address the water issues. And if not, what are the alternatives?
No, I don't think that the framework as such is the driving force. I think that you need maybe, and this is, it's interesting that you are asking that question because our board has had a working meeting the last 2 days. We were not really in the WWF discourse, but we also had our own discussions because we are finishing our mandate at the end of this year. And we are asked from the Secretary General to make suggestions for the future. What has to be done that the SDGs will be implemented? Now, on water, we have seen that the water sector is not such a dynamic sector than the climate discourse, So we are suggesting to look into the ICCP, how this model, how they are functioning, and then maybe we can draw some lessons learned from them to see that the water sector can get such a dynamic process in motion, But I also have learned that the water sector as such is also very diverse. So maybe, you have here the World Water Forum, then you have the Stockholm Water Week, then you have the Singapore, then you have the Amsterdam, then you have the GWP, and you name them, Maybe if these organizations would also interlink each other, come together, and even then interact with the energy sector, because energy and water is very highly linked. So there are various ideas, So the SDG can only be a framework, and then we have to see how the individual goal will then be implemented. Sure. And of course there we need a lot of initiatives to do that.
Very good suggestions. I'm going to move to Mark, and now I remember you. I would like to get some 2 or 3 or a list of priority issues that we will be able to bring up at the regional level at least. As Dr. Ida said, we do not have very effective international process to address water security issues in many, many ways. It's in the hands of the national government. But in the meantime, there are a lot of issues that could be lifted up at the regional level because it's so important to our region. What are the 2 very important things that or recommendations you would offer that could become, at the regional level, become very, very important, or you would like to see addressed? Thank you.
Good. That's a good question. What comes immediately to mind is the group under whose auspices we're sitting here, the Asia Pacific Water Forum. I think it started indeed at a World Water Forum in 2003, not far away from here in Japan, and I think it's a real strength, and I think perhaps the governments of this region could be supporting the Asia Pacific Water Forum, perhaps to a greater extent, and that we use it literally as a bridging organisation, which I don't think it really does at the moment. We could, because I see bridging organisations perhaps as, and Ravi referred to apex organisations as similarly perhaps. I think they're the sorts of organisations that can operate across boundaries, probably without the complicated governance structures that we tend to put in place in things like banks and what have you. So perhaps we can be a bit more flexible and nimble and rely more strongly on some of these structures that can operate across the region. So I suppose I'm arguing for some sort of strengthening almost of the forum in this region. What else might I?
You can just stick to this one, which is a good point already, actually.
Yeah.
Dr. Bin Abdullah, what are the two things you would like to recommend at the regional level that we need to enhance? Thank you.
I think first there is a very important difference between climate change and water. Mm-hmm. In climate change, what you do can impact on your neighbors. In water, other than transboundary rivers, what you do does not impact on your neighbors. Mm-hmm. But this doesn't mean that there should not be cooperation among regions, because there's a lot that we can learn from our neighbors, and especially people in the same region, we have the same climatic conditions. What I would like from this forum would be that we need to talk a little bit more about this disconnect between the way we discuss water issues at the global and national level and what's actually happening on the ground. This is the 7th World Water Forum, and we have been talking about IWRM since Rio, and in fact even before Rio in Dublin, which was a year before Rio. And yet, on the ground, we still have all these problems. So when we talk about IWRM at World Water Forums, we always put up the slide of the definition by GWP. But on the ground, we don't see things moving. And it reminds me of a story that my wife once told me. In Malaysia, the Minister of Agriculture announces that, say, the price of fish is so much and vegetables is so much. And so she went to the market and she wanted to buy the fish. And then the fishmonger says, this is 10 ringgit. And my wife says, the minister on the radio says it's 5 ringgit. Then the fishmonger says, then you buy it from the minister. Because there is this disconnect between policies made and what's happening on the ground. And what we see happening on the ground is governments put a lot of emphasis on projects, maybe because they have to meet the targets in the MDGs and so on. And the minister will come and he will officiate at the opening of a big project. And then everybody loses attention on the project itself. And we do not get enough money to operate and to run it. And no minister has ever come back to an operating body to praise the organization for doing a good job. The only time a minister will come back is when the stakeholders complain. And then he will come and then he will try to find fault why things are not being done. And perhaps it's the way we are setting targets. We set targets in the MDGs, for example, that we would reduce the number of people with access to safe drinking water. And so we put a lot of focus on developing the projects. But at the end of it, if we do not put enough investment into sustainably carrying it out, it doesn't make sense, because after 2 years, then the whole thing breaks down. But governments have already reported back to the UN, I've met my targets. And so maybe when we set the targets for the SDGs, we should think a little bit about how we can bring it down to operational level.
Okay, very good point. Thank you very much. Can I go to Jayamala? 2 of the things you think very importantly need to be brought up to the regional level?
I would say data, more and more data on what we want to achieve and what we are achieving, sharing platforms which are amenable to extracting intelligence and actually have the ability to transfer knowledge in an actionable form. I'd say those are the 2 important things.
Okay, thank you. Pongs, any suggestion? 2 things from you?
Aside from what I brought up earlier, Ms. Chung-Hwa, on increasing our focus on youth-led projects and moving towards that direction, having been well advanced now on knowledge and support to youth networks, I'd also like to point out inclusiveness, that as I've been asked here to represent youth, but I also understand that, as Mr. Thierry said, that young farmers, they don't get to be here, and we don't get necessarily to hear their opinions. We work closely with Plan International to bridge that gap, because they work closely in communities, and in the young water leaders that we have here in the forum, we'd like to see more of young people who face the challenges, and we could work with them and to solve the problems that they face. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, can I just add one more point?
Yes.
When I said data, I would also like to see not just what has worked, but more importantly, what has not worked. I think we've spent so much money. If we can all understand what has not worked, it would really be useful to spend the dollars more effectively going forward. Thank you.
Okay, good point. And Mr. Mizutani-san, your 2 points?
Yes. I mentioned sharing the informations. The concrete way is the sharing information is we can provide the BCP manuals to the people, because we are operating, maintain 300 project sites. We are closing a talk with local municipality, prepare for natural disaster, and we are conducting joint emergency training together with the municipalities. So those manuals, we are in a position to share the Asian countries' necessary papers.
Thank you. Dr. Kim, anything to add?
All those are very good points. And in addition to that, I feel the trade between regional trade is also very important in terms of food. Some countries, they are producing sufficient food. Some countries, they don't. But now, because of every country, they want to have food security by own. Then sometimes that doesn't make sense, even though they don't have sufficient water, but they are suffering. So maybe these still very sensitive issues, but if we can facilitate at least some sub-regional level for this trade on the food and also energy, because energy production also need water. Then some country, they may have sufficient water to generate hydropower, then they can export. Then the other country doesn't need to have really to invest this other thermal power project which will require cooling water, something like that. So we can look at region overall, then maybe we can best use our limited resources. That's one thing we need to think about. And second, I agree with our colleague, and innovation or technology transfer. This will be very important. And for example, I feel now water sector is, yes, that's not very dynamic, but one dynamic area is I can see wastewater management. Now, there are a lot of innovation is coming up. Then previously, wastewater is black hole. So, invest money, but never ending. But now, it becomes revenue generating exercise. If you connect, and new technology are available, then because of this small scale, so that cost is still expensive because now upfront cost, someone need to pay. Then, if we recall solar energy, about 5 years ago, solar energy was so expensive, so no one want to take the solar without having subsidy. But now, in our assessment, within 5 years, solar energy will be compared with other traditional energy cost. Now, because now we scaled up the solar energy use, then now the cost is very rapidly down. Then wind is the same. Wind now is comparable already, but wind that's costly. But on wind, that's already cost effective. But some years ago, it's very expensive compared with traditional energy. But I can see sanitation, if we can bundle, at least in the sub-regional level, regional level, we can scale up this new investment, new innovation, then perhaps the price will be very rapidly going down. Then it will be a very dynamic sector. So I have very big hope. Then this water sector, we can have very dynamic activities, investment, if we can put all together, it bundle. So I feel the water area is sometimes very sensitive if you talk about transboundary. But if we look at more trade, virtual water issues, so trade, either food or energy, or if we can work together to reduce the cost of a new technology, that will help.
Great points. I'm going to open the floor again for a couple of questions, if you have burning questions. Yes, please. The microphone, please.
My name is Harshavardhan, and I work with Argyam Foundation.
It's working. Yeah.
So, what is coming out from the panelist discussion is that there's a nexus between all components from water, food, energy, sanitation, social and economic. But as we see in the next SDGs, there are 17 goals, and as you rightly said, Dr. Eid, that each goal has a constituency. And since this nexus is kind of emerging, we are yet to understand how the nexus works. In some sense, it relates one to each other. And if we have to have a harmonious balance between this whole ecosystem, where one doesn't override the other, how do we maintain that nexus and that balance while considering the stakeholders, right from community, local governments to central governments and then national, and also breaking away from the silos. So water being kind of addressed by various energy, agriculture. So how do we deal with that? So that's a comment, a suggestion. How do we look at breaking away from silos and bringing in a harmonious balance between this whole nexus, linking it to water, food, energy, the sanitation connect, which is kind of emerging right now for the water resource as a threat.
Thank you for the question. Dr. Kim, I think probably you are well positioned to answer that, because when ADB decides what to invest, in many, many ways you have to look at this, nexus issues there as well. Would you like to respond a little bit?
I fully agree with your suggestions, and now we need to look at how we can break silos and we can make different agencies sit together. And then from our side, nexus issues we want to bring down to very specific activities and projects. So we can have a good case. Then that case can be replicated. For example, as I explained, this wastewater treatment, the used water, the treated water can be used, even sold to power generation company. And because of this revenue, now this wastewater treatment is economically viable. Previously, if you separate these two factory or plant, then it's never you can make this economically viable. But now, because of private sector, their innovation, they connect it. Now it's viable. Then we want to scale up this one. So rather than talking, it's a very high levels on connectivity or nexus. Now we need to bring down. So on the ground, we need to make it happen, and then we need to share these cases, and we can scale up. That's the way. Thank you.
Can I direct this question to Ms. Utani-san from the private sector? Do you have one specific case that could respond to the question? Thank you.
Sorry. In case of Japan, all kind of wastewater sludge and also food waste, there is no land reclamation dispose. Everything converted energy by fermentation, fertilizers, or collecting phosphate for fertilizers. That technology, Dr. Kim said, that technology we can adopt it Asian countries, because waste we dispose, that is waste. But waste, you can convert it energy, that can be the energies. So that is important, I think.
Thank you very much. One more question, if there is any. Two more, great. Three, great, finally. Everyone is waking up. Okay. Can I just get, yeah, please.
Hi. My name is Deborah Tan from China Water Risk. Obviously focus on water issues in China. I'd like to sort of say that I think in China, the water, energy, and climate nexus is all together, because China's the upper riparian of a lot of transboundary waters, and also is at the point where she also has to add a lot of power on limited water resources. Also, the coal bases are right next to the agricultural heartlands, and so water savings in agriculture is very important for transfer to coal bases. But with the onset of climate change is also difficult. We did some analysis in a couple of coal-based provinces. Irrigation savings are going to be less and less because we're going to have to hold that water back, or rather we're going to need more power to power that, and power also requires water. So we're finding some tough choices to sort of recommend for power adds. Within China, more hydropower could lead to higher geopolitical risks. More coal, obviously, to more glacial melt, which is not beneficial for everyone globally. But I'm not sure if there are any solutions. And, you know, for China, there's also massive energy savings, which we haven't really sort of like talked about. And anytime we save power, we also save water. And you know, on a per capita basis, power per capita, China's quite high relative to everybody else. India and Indonesia, you know, probably India, 1/5 of China's per capita power, and Indonesia much less than India. And you know, as you all mentioned, hydro and coal are probably the cheapest form of power to add, and that's also going to add additional water issues, because water, you know, water for cooling and so on. So is solar energy the way out, or is wind turbines, if those prices can actually fall? But then China is also the manufacturer of a lot of these equipment. Wind turbines need heavy rare earth elements, all of which are highly polluting at the moment because of the illegal rare earth market in China. So if we attend to consequences in the water space, are we not sort of raising some other problems in some other areas which we haven't really tackled? And China's, you know, responsible for 90% of rare earth production, not because it has the biggest reserves, but possibly because a lax policy environment and regulatory environment has also allowed these rare earths to be cheap. But then should then any one country sort of subsidize somebody else's country's renewable growth and drive by actually tapping those resources? And it's not just China's problem, it's the region's problems. And I feel that as an Asian living in Asia, it's not really prioritized at the moment, but we should prioritize it. I don't really think that. I'd be glad if we actually had some solutions. I'd be really pleased to listen to some suggestions.
Sure, I'm going to gather 3 hands together before. So, panelists, please be patient and think about it. What do you want to respond? Can I go back? There's a hand in the back. Thank you. No, okay, there.
Good evening. I have 2 questions. One to Dr. Kai-Shu, the other one to Dr. Kim. For Dr. Kai-Ru, I like your story about the minister and the fishmonger. But essentially, we observe that the interests of the government and the people are actually aligned, because the minister or the politician requires the support of the people to return to power. So if the people are requesting for proper water services and sanitation services, then by right, the politician should be putting emphasis on this and should be giving the people what they want. So are there deeper issues in your country or perhaps in the region which is hindering the improvement of services for water supply as well as sanitation? That's my question for Dr. Kai-Shu. My question for Dr. Kim is, you mentioned that there are funds to spend by ADB, but there's a lack of a good pipeline of projects. Is it because ADB has too stringent criteria in selecting what projects you want to fund? And what is the rate of return that ADB is looking at for the projects that you select?
Okay, one more. I think there's a hand in the middle. No? No more? Okay, front then. Terry.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to support the 4 key messages of Mr. Kim. He talked about wastewater treatment, trade, improving water use efficiency, with the qualification that what's in it for the farmer. Many farmers, very often, they lose money by what we recommend for them to improve water use efficiency. And finally, solar power and solar irrigation. We had a case study from INI on India, looking at the potential for solar pumping to revolutionize the nexus in India. We know is very much linked to groundwater. And by their estimate, that these are figures from pilots, $1,250 per hectare if you grow grains, pulses, and oilseeds, $4,200 per hectare if you grow fruit and vegetables, $84,000 per hectare if you farm solar power. 84,000. And we asked if there was not 1 zero too many. And, and these are actually figures from case studies. So yes, there's certainly big potential for this, if we make sure that this does not destroy our aquifers with free energy.
Okay. Thank you for the questions. Now back to the stage. Dr. Kim, there are a few questions direct to you. If you could answer them, that'd be great.
Yeah. On the China, these water issues, also the farmer issues, let me explain the way ADB is also helping to address. One area we are doing is ecosystem payment. So farmers, the upstream, farmers or rural area, they protect the water resources or they saved. Then downstream, they benefit. So now we are now pilot testing to introduce the payment system. So downstream, because of their benefit, so they can pay on these ecosystem services. This is what actually we want to help the farmers to address this incentive to keep environment. And second one is in China, the water issue is the location is very different. So their industry or agriculture area and the water available areas are very inconsistent. They are not matching. That's a quite problem. But also this river pollution. Polluted water is another problem. Even though in industry areas or more agricultural areas, you do not have much water, but because of industries or after agricultural product or livestock, the water polluted. So even your available water is small, but now the water is polluted. That's why the water issue becomes more severe. So we are helping Chinese government to improve this water quality. And we are doing a lot of the river cleanup project, including this wastewater treatment. So the entry point of this water can be treated, so the water source can be cleaner. Then that water can be easily used for many purposes. This is what actually we are helping to address these water issues in China. And the water project, yes, ADB, we address the rate of return, economic rate of return. So when we prepare our project, yes, that should be economically viable. But economically viable this is different from financially viable. Economically viable need to reflect their co-benefit. So in terms of rate of return, we look at more broad sense. However, now water project, usually we work with our counterpart. Then either the government, they do not give priority. So actually we cannot prepare the project in advance. And second, their information or their capacity is not there. So project preparation we had some challenges to prepare the economically viable project. However, actually, ADB, we invest about 2 billion every year in water, but we want to scale up. And also, we want to bring some additional money from private sector. So this we are challenging. Not only from the public money, but also we want to bring some private money so we can have public-private partnership so we can address. So something like to use this to connect different water users so we can have some kind of economic benefit so that we can make the project is viable. Then this will require some, as our colleague said, the cross-institution, cross-sectoral collaborations. That's just some challenges. And another one is, if we look at our project implementation performance, then water sector, that's relatively the progress is slow in terms of project implementation when you compare with other infrastructure projects. Because in water area, as we discussed, many stakeholders are involved and different institutions involved, and also water price. This is another issue we need to deal with. So that's why water project development is, we can say, more complex than other projects. So we suggest to prepare some more time and much upstream, so prepare good project in advance. So once we have sufficient resources, we can finance. Because project development, infrastructure project development take time, but I can say water investment project take more time. Because also some environment issues also may come. That's why we need to prepare well the water infrastructure.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. And would colleagues on this side respond some points?
I had a question addressed to me, but before that, I'd just like to touch on what the lady talked about the situation in China. I think our appetite for energy and for water keeps on increasing. And with climate change, the availability of water that we can easily use is going to be much reduced. So the solution is not to do more on supply management, but rather to do more on demand management. And in the energy side, the low-lying fruit is really to increase the efficiency of use. In agriculture, we talked a lot about more crop per drop, and I was pushing for more crop, less drop, and that's how we have to do. And we have to design our systems so that we can be more resilient. If we look at floods, it's getting worse and worse, and in the future it's going to be even worse. And we cannot have the kind of money to protect against it. So we need to look back at how we deal with that situation. And back to the question about governments being accountable to voters. In actual fact, when you talk about democracy, a lot of it depends on the political machinery, even in the United States. It's the political machinery which forms people's perception and people's support for a party. And you get more accountability the lower down you go. So if you have an election for the mayor or for the village head, there would be more accountability. But when you're talking about national level, prefecture, provincial, state level, you don't quite get that kind of accountability. And yet, we have so little of these local government elections in developing countries. And even if we do have, a lot of the powers and the resources are retained at the national and at the state level, rather than at the town level or municipal level.
Thank you, Mark. Do you have some final words? Thank you.
Yes. In fact, my quick reflection is that I worked for 27 years for local government, so I have to support what you were just talking about. But to the complexity question of energy and water, I don't think I have a good answer, but I want to say that we need to be able to deal with the complexity. And with respect to one of my colleagues before, I don't think we can afford to simplify these things. We can uncomplicate the complexity, but I don't think we should simplify it. We're a smart species. We've got some great tools, and one of them is systems thinking. And I really think we need to embrace that systems thinking. So my comments earlier about T-shaped professionals, I'd like to reinforce. I think we need teams. That maybe it's a team in ADB around a water project. Maybe it's a team in your organisation. The teams have to be transdisciplinary. I think we really need to embrace the future complexity. Because we can't afford not to.
Thank you. I think we did well in terms of the timing. And before we close, I'm going to give back the mic to our chair, Mr. Ravi, to do the conclusion. A big round of thank you and applause to the panelists. Thank you for the insightful sharing. Thank you. Ravi, the floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm not going to try and is that on? Yeah. I'm not going to try and wrap this up because the panelists have done a great job in explaining and negotiating complexity and difficulties and convergence. So I'm not going to try that. But what I'm going to say is that throughout these few days, and indeed before that, when we talk about a region, we talk about a region of staggering size. Everyone talks about Asia Pacific, 60% of the world's population. Staggering diversity. The largest country in the world and possibly the smallest country in the world. Old people and young people. So many different kinds of political systems. And then what Thierry talks about, the velocity of change, staggering transition, stages of transition. So it's easy to say that, well, give up, what can we do together? It's all too difficult. But actually, there are some principles that are common, that we can all embrace. And the principles are historically proven, so it isn't something typical of our region. And the principle is to have some sort of a theory of change which builds around the idea of policy development which focuses on infrastructure, institutions, and information. Policy development that believes in investment and capacity so that policies can be implemented, and technologies that can support the implementation of policies. Now, that requires inclusive institutions. And by inclusive institutions, I don't mean necessarily very large institutions that necessarily employ thousands and thousands of people. It means institutions that are open to ideas, institutions that are open to participation. And that's national institutions, local institutions, and institutions like this, what we are. We are trying to work together to exchange ideas, and this is what is going to generate pace and change. When it comes to solutions, as many speakers have said, there is a lag between national intention and local action. One doesn't necessarily have to wait for national intention. You can do local action, and eventually, if you have inclusive institutions, they will meet. The virtual spiral that the IWRM is. We go up the virtual spiral. But in crafting solutions, possibly we mustn't fear complexity. As Mark has said, do not fear complexity. Resist singularity. Do not say this everywhere. Celebrate diversity and insist on accountability. Those could be some slogans that we could use. All inclusive institutions are built on transparency and trust. And all successful policies need necessarily to be built on policies that take the long view and look at the last mile. So that's what we all have to look at. So let's work together using the warp of action, the weft of knowledge, and let's together weave a coat of many colors. Thank you.